Hey everybody, welcome to the In All Things podcast. It's time to see God in everything.
Well, welcome to our In All Things podcast. It looks a little different today. There's no Mitch and no Steve here. It's Mother's Day, so we wanted to come on and do something special for mothers. And so I'm Kristi Johnson. I'm on staff here. I'm the director of fun is what I like to say, but I think I'm actually the director of operations. I am married to my husband, Terry, who plays drums here. I have a son, Tucker, who is 24, and he is actually a worship leader at another church. And I have a son, Brock, who passed away in 2015. And I've worked here since 1999, so a long time. And I have with me actually my best friend, Amy Shaw.
Woo.
And so, Amy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Amy Shaw. I am the Kidsmen Director here. I've been here, about 23 years. Not working that whole time, but I've been in children's ministry for over 20 years. I'm married to my husband, Bob. He's a nurse anesthetist. And then I have three adult kids. Riley, who's married and with a child, my oldest, and then Delaney, who's married with a kid too, and then my son, Jansen, who's getting ready to graduate from college. So I'm going to be a total empty nester soon. That's exciting.
I don't know how that happened to us.
I know. How do we get so old? What's going on?
So I thought first we could maybe just talk about our moms. Okay. So just a little bit about what trait do you think you got from your mom? I know from my mom was very outgoing, very chatty. My mom passed away when she was only 63, and there was really no Facebook then. And I know if there was social media, she would have lived longer because she could have kept social, and it would have just given her a little extra oomph to keep going. So what's something you think you got from your mom?
My mom's super organized and very detailed, which I feel like I got that part of her personality. But she's also very fun. I don't know, though. She's got a better sense of humor than I do, I think. I'm kind of a quiet, funny sort of weird way. But she's sassy and has some attitude, and she just loves people wherever they're at. And I think that's something I got from her, too.
Yeah, I see that in you, too. Yeah. So my mom passed away, as I mentioned early, and that was hard. She was 63, and you just don't expect to lose your mom that early. So that was devastating for me because it's your mom.
Absolutely.
I talked to her every day, and so that was a big loss in my life, just not having my mom anymore. And I know, with your mom, just with us getting older, our parents are aging, and that's hard. Talk about a little bit about what it feels like just to know that we're getting older, therefore our parents are aging, and that's scary.
It is hard to watch parents age, and I think my mom had a stroke a few years ago, and and that it changes things, and you see them in a different light. And you realize how valuable time is, I think. As you age, your values change and your priorities change. And I think the time I get to spend with my mom now is very valuable to me. So any memories that we get to make. And I love having her come up now because she gets to play with her great-grandkids. So those are memories that, I love making with her and seeing just how happy she is to be around family.
Absolutely. Yeah. We get busy in our own lives, and sometimes it's hard to make time for family. You're very good at that with your mom. I see it in action, and I had that with my mom too, but it's easy to not have it and not even on purpose. Next thing you know, a month went by, and you're like, oh, I haven't talked to my dad or whatever, and so it's just important, I think, to make sure that you use that time because you think you're always going to have it, and then you find out you don't, and that's difficult.
Yeah, it is for sure. Because my mom's still alive, so she's 96.
Wow. That's amazing.
And so to get to spend time, so I went to see her last month. So spending time with her too, and of course she's 96, but she's still with it.
Wow.
She still remembers who you are, and she's still sassy as ever. So that trait passes on, the sassiness in the Bruce side of my family genes there. But so that's a blessing to get to spend some more time with her too.
Yeah. I hope if I live to be 96, I'm still with it. I hope if I live to be 60, I'm still with it at this point.
Exactly.
Let's move on to something a little more fun.
Okay.
So tell me what your favorite Mother's Day gift was. Now, I prepared this. Amy has no idea what I'm asking her today. So
yeah, right. I'm Steve Markle today. I'm clueless and not knowing what's going on here.
Since I wrote it, I'll go first. My favorite Mother's Day gift, we're very busy, and my favorite gift is one time my family just planned for us to stay home, and we sat on the patio all day, and we grilled out, and we did nothing. Like that for me was perfect and exactly what I needed.
Yes. Well, my love language, high acts of service. So as my kids got older, they realized that about me. So anything that they would do for me, and one year they got together and like weeded the flower beds.
Nice.
Now I'm talking, I know that just sounds lame, but I was like, oh, they love me. They're out there picking weeds. That's how I feel loved the most. So, and as I get older, you know, Riley said to me the other day, I know your love language is acts of service, so I want to help you pack your house, you know. Yeah. So yeah, just doing things for me is awesome. So those are the ones I love the most. And plus, I love flowers. Yeah. Flowers are beautiful. How can you not love flower? You know, God's so creative with his, you know, making of creation. And I just love all kinds of flowers. So.
Absolutely. It's funny how our love language plays into that. So if you're someone who doesn't know your love language or haven't looked into that, it's a book called The 5 Love Languages. It'll change your parenting, your friendships, your marriage. Mine's quality time, which makes sense that I just want to sit out back and do nothing.
Right.
So if you haven't read that book, I highly encourage it. It's a great book for moms to read.
It is, for sure.
Well, now let's move into talking a little bit about the best and worst things about different phases of being a mom. And a neat thing that Amy and I have is we pretty much raised our kids together. We were friends. Our kids ended up being the best of friends. We went to the zoo together. We did pumpkin patches. We did lots of things together. So we've kind of been in each other's lives through all these phases. But I kind of broke it down into different phases because it's very different. So beginning like 0 to 5 years old. So what can you think about is like the best of those times and the worst of those times?
Well, I had 3 kids that were 0 to 5 in that range at one time. So life, it's funny because I try to remember things about that period of my life, and I think I was just in survival mode. I was just trying to survive. Bob worked long hours, so I was a parent at home alone a lot with the kids. So I was the disciplinary, wore every hat. And I think, that was rough, just trying to make sure everybody was surviving. And if we had pajamas all day and ate ice cream for dinner, then that's how we survived. So those are some good memories attached to that, too. But I think that was just trying to survive the day-to-day things. And then a good time, did you say?
Yeah, like the best and worst times of those years.
I loved all the early phases. Toddlers are actually one of my favorite ages, where they're just learning everything. And then watching the kids care for each other at that age. Riley was a second mom to Jansen, and Delaney was always tagging along and wanted to do everything Riley was doing. So just watching them grow in their relationships with each other, I think that was really rewarding.
Yeah. I loved the baby phase. I loved when they were snuggly and you just held them and you could make them smile. I loved all those things. Yeah. Just the first time being a mom and just learning this love that you didn't even know you had. You know, of course, I love my husband, I love my family, but this was just a different, I would put everything before myself to fix you, kind of love. And that was pretty amazing. There's really nothing like it. But it was hard. I had 2 boys and they were 2.5 years apart and they were really good kids. But there were days that I sat on the floor in the laundry room and shut the door in tears, just wondering if I was going to make it through these ages. And I had good kids who didn't throw tantrums or anything like that. So definitely hard. I hear like friends of mine who have kids in that age that just are so worn down by it all. And I'm like, just keep going. I promise it gets better. I mean, it's still struggles, but just different struggles.
Absolutely. And I think it's part of your personality too, because I like things picked up and organized.
Yes.
So when you have kids, it's not like that, And there were days that the toy room stayed messy. I went to bed. I was like, I need to be on my best, so I need sleep. So you have to let little things go because that stuff really doesn't matter. We had a neighbor come in one time and he's like, man, your house is just terribly messy. Like he was like trashing me, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm walking over toys. There's no room on the floor, And then he had twins. Surprise! And then he was like, I understand. Yes. I understand. And I'm like, I want to have fun with my kids. I don't want to be that mom that's like picking up the toy as they drop it, So
yes, I was a little less laid back than you. Couldn't go to bed if the toys were out. But you know what? You do what you do, and everyone's different. Right. You move along. So then let's talk about like 5 years old through elementary school.
Okay.
So for me, those were fun times. I love volunteering in school. I went in every Friday in their school and volunteered, and I worked the book fair, and the little kids that didn't have money, I gave them money. I helped kids learn how to read. I knew all my kids, like friends. I just felt involved and had a purpose in my parenting a little bit beyond just being at home with them. And it was fun. They were just starting sports. They were having a personality. Tucker was like performing, I swear, from the day he was born.
Yes.
So all the difference in that was easy. And then also the hard part was the difference in the kids, because Brock was like, sports. And Tucker was like, I don't really want to do that. I want to sing, and hey, watch me act this entire hour play out that had no plot, And so I think starting to learn the different personalities in them, that was kind of tough.
Yeah, I agree. I think when I look back to their elementary age years, I think I was kind of like, yes, I'm getting my first one in school. I've got 2 at home now, to play with, because having quality time with individual kids is challenging as a mom, I think, and important to try to do that. But the elementary age, I think watching them develop, like you said, their personality, whether they're going to be really outgoing or they're going to be quiet. And my girls all the kids were pretty studious. Like, they were pretty serious. We wanted them to really love going to school. So it was important for us to have them go in and get to know their teachers, try to develop friendships with other kids. So having play dates and watching them grow in that way. But I think, and like you said, every kid is so different. Riley was really studious and kind of quiet. Delaney was more outgoing and just kind of like, everything's great and beautiful. And Jazz was the kid that flipped out of circle time. He wasn't bad, but bored. I think bored might be the word for it. So watching them develop in those early ages, I think, that was a good time.
Yeah, and for me, I think that's such an important time to make sure your kids are in church, to make sure they're in church, and it's just something you do. It's not something you wake up on Sunday and say, I think I'm going to sleep in today. And I just think it's important to instill that early. And the things they learn in kids ministry is beyond what you can really teach them or adds to what you teach them at home. Because my kids would come home and talk about things that I was like, I remember that story, and it would stir a conversation. And I think it's such an important thing. I know you do too, because that's what you do here.
Yes, exactly. I mean, my kids lived here.
Yeah.
So they would come in, throw their shoes off like they were at home, and this is kind of their second home growing up here at Sycamore. But I think instilling, it wasn't a question of whether or not we were going to church. It was something that we did, and they loved coming. And learning and just developing relationships with their small group leaders, which is important for them to learn how to trust other adults in their life when it's a safe area. And I think just learning the basis of who God is and that how much Jesus loves them. And it starts in kids, planting those seeds that they can develop and grow and nurture over time. I think that's a vital part, especially as they embark on school years, because I'm telling you, the school years are tough years for kids, learning how to navigate life and stuff. So when you bring them into church and they can start to develop those that foundation of who Christ is in their life, that's where to go.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
that
where it all
base
starts.
will stay with them forever.
Yes, absolutely. The strong foundation of who he is.
Yeah, and my kids were like yours. My husband played drums, so they had to come to 2 services, and they didn't really care. And then it was neat to see as they got older, Tucker started helping in kids ministry, and then even Brock, and Brock even baptized a couple of his friends, So it was just such a good thing, something about. I'm so happy that I instilled in my kids early on that I think is just so important. And then for that age, because I think this starts at that age, let's just talk about busyness a little bit. Like, it's even from when our kids were little, like Tucker's 24, even from when my kids were little, there's so many more opportunities to be busy. There's so many things that you can put your kids in, so many things you can, and it doesn't seem to be things we're doing. It seems to be things we're putting our kids into. Like, we're afraid they're going to miss out. We're afraid if, they don't do this, they're never going to be a college athlete, which they're probably not going to be anyway.
Nope.
And we don't see that. And we get so busy that things like church are like, well, I can't because I have a good reason. We have, soccer, we have baseball, or we have whatever it is. But when that continues all the time, I feel like they're just missing such a vital part that's so important to their life for something that's really not going to matter. And I know it's a touchy subject with people.
It is. Well, and Bob and I, we kind of laid the law with that, the busyness. We had 3 kids, so our time was limited. He worked long hours, so I was the one carpooling around, and so we limited each kid to one activity per season. And I felt like that was important because I wanted them to thrive and really understand what it meant to be part of a team. And sometimes if you have overlapping things, they have to pick and choose, and then I felt like that kind of defeated the purpose of being a teammate. We wanted them to learn what it meant to follow through with a commitment. So we tried to introduce our kids to different things, and of course Riley was the soccer. That's all that kid wanted to do. We tried, let's try swimming, or let's try something else. And nope, she loves soccer. So we were like, okay, we'll jump on that train. And that's what we did throughout, from the time she was 4 all the way through college. Yeah. So that was her thing. And then with Delaney, she was, more artistic and took some art classes and did some things, but she loved dance. So we did the dance thing with her. And then Jazz, of course, jumped into the soccer boat again. So, but yeah, I think families don't build enough margin in their life for quality time. Because I'm sure you can spend quality time in a car with your kid. You can have some good conversations in there, but odds are probably not going to happen a whole lot there, And how much, when your focus is on the road and your kids are in the back seat, you're not face to face with them, And I think it's important to use that time, but I also think it's important to have time to do nothing together. Yes. You don't have to be entertained the whole time. Right. It's important for that margin to build those strong bonds with your kids and have deeper conversations about things, Some of the great conversations come from what they're learning at church, because we really try to bring it to a life application to what stage of life that they're in, So I think talking about, how God is always with me, you might be talking, about Jesus being with the disciples and that, God's always with them and building those relationships and stuff. So I just think it's important to build that margin in to have some quality time at home, to sit down and have a meal together.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Sit around the table, have some conversation about stuff. And if you don't know what to say, then there's plenty of conversation starters that you can do, put some questions in a jar, pull one out if you need help starting a conversation with your kids.
But you have to have the time to even do that.
Yeah, exactly. But you make time for what's important to you.
Yeah, sometimes we act like we fell into this trap of being busy.
Exactly.
And you're like, no, you made these choices.
Yes, it's a choice that you make. It really is.
Yes, we were kind of like you. We were like one sport a season, and I made the mistake once to let Brock play 2 because he's young and he was good and everything. It was so much fun. And I drove myself crazy. And when you have multiple kids, you end up dividing and conquering with your husband. So then I'd miss out on Tucker or Brock's, whoever I was with. And so we decided, we're not going to do this. Now, we were still busy, but we also wouldn't commit to anything that was regularly on Sunday.
Right.
So Brock played fall baseball. It moved to Sunday, and we're like, we can't do it. Terry coached, and it was very frowned upon. We were the weird church people that were doing that. And, with travel ball, he had tournaments sometimes, things you couldn't control, but we wouldn't commit to anything on Sunday. So I heard something on the news the other day that was talking about the pace of busyness and the pace of the things that we're putting our kids in. And that high blood pressure and stress and mental illness is at an all-time high. And we're instilling that in our kids by being busy, 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 and then making them think they have to be busy, busy, busy. And then they grow up and do that, and there's no rest and no time for rest, and just how damaging that is, and we just don't see it.
Oh, for sure. I completely agree with that, because I feel like kids, when you're jumping from one thing to the next, where's their breathing space? Where's their chance to just be a kid and just figure out how to entertain myself without, a TV or computer or anything, and I think kids are missing that these days. They don't go outside and play enough.
Or coloring books.
Well, that's what I mean, right? Play with some Play-Doh. My kids, we had the funnest time when they were little with rice.
Yes,
my house would get trashed. My dining room table would be covered in rice, but they had an hour, hours of fun playing at the table, just playing with rice.
My kids loved coming to your house and playing with rice because it gave me hives.
Hey, I had dogs. They ate the rice. It was all good.
Yes. All right, let's move into middle school. So middle school, I thought middle school was tough years.
They are tough years.
Kids are really mean, and they're all just trying to figure out who they are and where they belong, what crowd they fit into. And middle school was hard for Tucker. He, like I said, he wasn't super sporty. He could play, he just didn't want to, and that made him a little different. And so he had a hard time a little bit being picked on, and he's just such a happy kid that we saw that in him. We actually took him out and put him in private school for middle school for a couple years. Now Brock, the complete opposite. He was sporty. Everyone loved Brock. He was he just shined through all of it. So it was hard to sit back and watch and kind of try to help them without being the overbearing mom that when your friends have a conflict, you're going to call the kid and yell at the kid or whatever.
Right.
Like letting them learn how to make it, because I think it's so important to teach kids how to fail early. That sounds terrible, and we don't want our kids to fail, and it breaks our heart, but they're going to have hard things in life. They're going to fail. They're going to have disappointment, and life is just not fair. And, you hear kids say, it's not fair. Well, the sooner they learn that it's not always fair, the better they're going to adapt to being a middle schooler, a high schooler, an adult. Like our lives, we have crappy things that happen to us. It's just not fair. And so many times we put them in the bubble of protecting them. We don't want any disappointment. Like, we don't want them to not make a team. We don't want them to, have their heart broken, which of course we don't want any of that. But we have to let them fail and not keep them from things just so that they're in the bubble, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. Bob and I were not like the hovering parent that came to the rescue every time either. We just, yeah, you're right. Kids kind of have to learn how to get some tough skin sometimes, and they have to learn how to cope with people. They have to learn how to work with people, difficult people, because the sooner that they can learn how to work with a tough kid or somebody who's picking on them, those are life skills that they're going to carry with them all the way through. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't remember anything in particular or any incidences, but I just remember the middle school years where they were not easy. It's confusing times for kids, plus hormones are starting to kick in. So kids are struggling internally with things, just trying to understand what life is with all these emotions and feelings that are coming. So helping kids navigate through that, those are rough years, I think. And we had our kids back to back, so we were in middle school for a few years in a row. Right. Delaney, of course, is my more emotional kid, so she was happy to tell us how she was feeling about stuff. So dealing with that, but dealing with the quiet ones, I think, can be more difficult. Mm-hmm. The ones that internalize everything, because I'm an internal processor, so I think a lot about stuff before I allow myself to react, and I could see that in my kids too. And we always gave them freedom to say things at home the way they were feeling, so they could get them out. But you still have those quiet ones that just keep everything inside, and it's like trying to pull it out of them is important so they can learn to articulate and understand it's okay, let's work through this, let's work through this anger, or work through this, that you're feeling upset that your friends left you out of something. Because you're right, middle schoolers are terrible. They're very mean to each other, and kids, like the girls might come home crying because somebody was leaving them out at recess. I hated recess time at school. I mean, it's good for the kids to get out in some fresh air, but in middle school, it's almost like not constructive. It's so cliquey starting, and so trying to teach the kids how to work through all of that. And you can, you try to teach them to be responsible for their part. Yeah. You can't be, you can't take responsibility. You can't change other people's minds all the time, and that's not your job to convince them. Do you know what I mean? Just focus in on what you need to do for yourself, to get through it.
Yeah, and something I don't think was such a big deal when our kids are in middle school, but it starts in middle school and it starts in elementary school now, but it's social media and phones. Yes. Like that is just such a problem. It can be. It usually is for that age.
Yes.
It's so much information all the time when their little brains aren't experienced enough. They're not responsible enough to take in all that information and filter out what's bad, what's good. I mean, you hear of like suicides over things on social media, and that breaks my heart. You hear about bullying through social media, or like inappropriate sexual things on social media. And I'm thankful we didn't have that back then, but
me too.
Breaks my heart for the kids now. And it's hard for the parent, I understand, to not let your child have it. Like the parents that choose not to, hats off to them. I'll tell you, we do some high school scholarships for the Brock Strong Foundation. And I've had, in the 6 years that we've been doing this, 2 students who are seniors and have never had social media that their parents chose not to. And seniors. I think that's amazing. And I've asked them, like, really? Do you feel left out? And in the beginning they did, but then they saw all the problems it caused. And they were thankful for it. I mean, there's TikTok, there's Instagram, there's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's all the things. And just as a mom, when you think you know what's going on and you have everything blocked, something new comes that you have no idea about. And so what do you think about social media? And
I'm not a big fan.
No.
I mean, I think it's great. to stay connected to family and stuff through social media, I think is cool. To put some inspiring things out there is great. But there's way too much negativity out there in the world. And I think you're right. The kids are just inundated with all of this information all the time. And, you know, they're going to look at the bad stuff if they have opportunity to. They're kids, you know. They're going to go research stuff, look things up. And you can only protect them so much, which is scary as a parent. You can, like you said, put every parental guideline on everything unless you allow them no computer time at all. That's the only way that they're never going to be exposed to stuff. Because even on, like, I was having issues with my laptop, it was popping things up. Do you know what I mean? Like, on its own. So I was like, man, you know. So it's really hard to protect them from that. And I think kids are just not equipped. They're just not equipped to deal with it. And
I think it's here. It's not going away.
It is not.
So keeping conversation open.
It is.
If you're a parent who chooses to not let your kids stay strong in your
yes,
beliefs,
right.
don't feel pressured like they're going to be left out.
I know. And I was a parent that waited a long time to get my kids cell phones. You know what I mean? But I felt like I was forced into it because of Bob's work schedule. And I was leaving kids in places like at soccer practice and taking another one to dance. And I didn't want her to be without being able to get in contact with me, you know. So I buckled down and I was like, okay, I'm getting you this. You have one phone number you can call. Yeah. That's it, you know. And then I was the parent that even through high school, I monitored their phones. They were not allowed to delete stuff, you know. And if I was looking on the phone bill, because back then you got a phone bill that showed everything, like the calls they were making, everything. So I was monitoring all that and looking at conversations and you know, when they started texting, wow, that's a whole new world. Then started sending pictures of stuff. That's a whole another issue to deal with. So, and you know, and back in our day, we got in trouble like. You did things that you hid from your parents when you were hanging out with your friends, you know, like the little kid up the street used to try to smoke cigarette butts. We had weird places to play, but there was an old building. Yeah. There was an old building like just right up the street from my house, and they built coffins in it. Oh. So you could go sneak in, and there's these old wooden coffins, and he would try to pick up like cigarette butts, and then my little brother would be the tattletale. Amy's trying to smoke cigarettes.
Yeah, today would be a picture. It would be on Facebook.
Well, right. That's what I'm saying. It's so different now. You know, there's nobody hiding. There's always somebody videoing your kids like out doing stuff. So you have to teach them, you know, like you've got to be on your guard. You've got to watch. You know, you got to protect yourself. And I think it's hard in the social media days to do all of that.
Yeah, I think it's hard too. Yeah.
And I'm glad that Facebook went around with my. When did it start? When was Facebook? When did that start?
I think it was like for our
I felt
kids,
like
it was
high school,
into middle school, beginning because Brock had some.
Did he?
Had Facebook, so a little bit then. But I'm glad we didn't have it. I think it can be a very positive thing, but more for adults. I just think kids aren't ready to have access to all that information all the time. Like I'm barely ready for that.
Yeah, that's why I don't get on much.
So in high school, pretty much like middle school, we kind of talked a little bit about that. Just your kid seems to find where they fit in, wherever that is, and kind of for me, personal experience. I know every kid's different, and every parents have different experience, and we're not professionals. We're just speaking about our personal journeys. I know for Tucker, he found where he fit in, and he loved high school. And then, you know, we had the tragedy of losing Brock in his junior year, and so his senior year. I probably would have done a few things differently. In my mind, was going to put him in this financial boot camp because I'm very financially driven with my mind. And I was going to put him in this boot camp so he was prepared. And then everything happened with Brock. I could barely brush my teeth in the morning. And I was like, just go have fun. Have fun your senior year. Do all the things. You don't have to have a job. Like I just wanted, he went through something he shouldn't have had to go through. And I let him just do whatever. And he did. He had a blast. He was head of the student section. He was homecoming king. But now I'm seeing I should have at least taken time to do that finance stuff with him because he isn't really prepared to go out into the world of adulthood. How about you?
Oh, yeah. Even driving, teaching your kids to drive was scary. Yeah. I just remember, not to throw you under the bus, Delaney, but we get in the car and she's like, how do I know where the tires go?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. I was like, well, they're attached to the steering wheel, honey. You know? Yeah. But yeah, just equipping them to adulthood, that's scary. Mm-hmm. You never feel like you've equipped your kids enough, you know? Like then you send them away to college and then that's when you find out how well you've equipped your
Yes.
your kids,
Yes.
you know, is when they're making the phone call, Mom, well, how do I blah, blah. And you're like, oh, yeah, I should have talked a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
Or, you know, and it's funny what your kids pick up from you too, because like some kids are like more frugal than others. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like some, they get the 2 pennies in their pocket and they're like, I need some bubble gum, you know, like I need to go out and spend this money in my pocket. And so they kind of pick up traits naturally, I feel like, just from watching you do stuff. But yeah, I never felt I completely equipped all of my kids. And, you know, by the time Jazz got to college, I was like, oh, finally, you know, he's going to college. I'm getting my last one in college. And then it's like, oh, have I paid enough attention to you, kid? You know, being the third one and the quiet one. And I keep thinking, does he know enough? But yeah, it's even things like balancing a checkbook.
Yeah.
You know, back in high school, we used to take home ec. They taught you how to balance a checkbook, how to sew something, how to cook something, you know.
Right.
But even like teaching them every day how to survive as an adult out there, you know, yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And I felt like Bob and I were kind of like skating through the kids' childhood until we got to those more adult years.
Yeah.
You know, we were kind of like, oh, this is not so hard. This is, you know, but we had good kids, so it made it easier. And then as they get older, you're like, wow, the problems get bigger and bigger as they get older. So it does. It completely changes the way you parent. And of course, you move from, you know, being the all-encompassing parent to more of like a coach, and then eventually you get to a friendship as you're, you know, like you are with Tucker now. It's more like cool friendship. It's awesome to experience that part of it. But yeah, when you're trying to coach them through those older years, because you don't want to tell them everything. They have to learn on their own how to experience stuff. And you almost want to see how they're going to react to certain situations, you know, because like one time I kept being like, man, I keep putting lunch money on Jazz's account for high school, and it's gone. Well, he was buying lunch for people who had forgot their lunch money. And Bob's like, we can't be mad at him for that. You know, like he's being super generous, and he is. He's a super generous kid, and he saw the need, and he wanted to do that. So I'm like, Bob's like, well, just put extra money on his account. But, you know, but it's, so you see those bits and pieces of stuff that you have taught them that come out. So that's rewarding when you get to that point, you know, seeing that. But
I feel like we could sit here and talk forever about parenting.
Oh,
and,
my
and
gosh.
trying to stay on track for
Sure.
this time, so we get asked to come
Right.
back someday on the podcast.
Oh, that's right.
I kind of wanted to move into personally as a woman, what it was like being a mom, what kind of struggles we had. Like for me, I thought about just time to do something for yourself. There was no time for that. And of course, I had a son who had a medical illness who spent a lot of time in the hospital. So I was either taking care of the kids at the hospital with him or working. I still worked the whole time. And that was hard to find time to just take care of myself. Like, you didn't have time to think about eating right. You just want to make sure you're eating, and your exercising was chasing them around and things like that. Making sure you had time for your marriage, because so many people put everything into their kids and their kids leave and there's nothing left in their marriage. And that happens so often, and it's so sad. So making sure that didn't happen, and making sure you had time for friendships and fostering those, and just balance in church. And that's all the things that come to my mind just as being a woman. And we always put ourselves last, and you throw in some kids and then you really put yourself last. And what do you think about that?
I don't know that ever changes, really.
Yeah.
I think with your mom, you know, you're always mom, and now I'm a grandma, so that's crazy.
That's crazy.
To think about that. And you just, I don't know, you just continually pour yourself out. But, you know, I think if you know where to get filled up at, you can continue to pour yourself out. But I do think it is a struggle. And my thing was, you know, I fought for a long time trying to find balance. And then I thought, you know, it's a myth. There is no such thing as balance. I mean, at least, you know, you can argue me on that. That's fine. And I do agree. But I feel like you're given each day, you're given moments, and you just need to make the most of that day and the moments that you're given, you know. And you can try to plan ahead, and you can try to do that, but life is always going to throw something at you. And as a mom, you learn to roll with the punches, you know. You learn to, you know, you get in that survival mode where you just do what you need to do, you know. And if you're loving your kids, and that's the most important part, you know, loving your kids, loving your husband with all that you got, you know. And that's probably where I feel like, you know, I dropped the ball more. I felt like Bob's an adult. He's sufficient. Like, I got to worry about these 3 kids, and no, that's not the right mindset. You can't do that either. You can't, ignore your husband, even though he is self-sufficient and he is an adult. But it's really important to spend that time and pour into that relationship, because when your kids are gone, like mine are now, Bob and I, we're having a great time, together now. We're spending a lot of time, doing things together and stuff. So it's good. I think maybe finding the balance in that way of learning how to spread things out, maybe that's maybe a better place for me to think when I think in terms of balance, making sure I'm not dropping that ball.
It's so much. Like for me and my OCD personality, I'm like, okay, when I know I need to do something, then I'm like, okay, I need to wake up every morning and have quiet time with God, because I believe that's important. Like, I think that's so important. I need to exercise. I need to be a good wife. I still need to be a good mom. I need to eat right. I need to all this stuff. I'm like, I don't have time. I have a job. Like, I don't have time. I have a foundation I run. Like, I don't have time to do all that stuff. And sometimes it can make you crazy. And like you said, you have to give yourself some slack, because I don't think there's ever a perfect balance. I've been trying to find it forever, making myself crazy. And don't beat yourself up. Like, I go through phases where I am good sometimes every single day, sitting down and doing a devotion and journaling. My mind works where if I journal, I'm better because it keeps me focused. Otherwise, I'm like, I got to do the laundry, or, So some days I'll do that every day for 2 months, and then something happens and 2 weeks go by and I didn't do it. And don't beat yourself up. Just get back on. The same thing with anything you're devoted to, exercise, anything that's important to you as a woman, because you're more than just a mom. Mom's very important, but you're more than just a mom. So anything that's important to you, find time. If you fall off the wagon of exercise or eating right or your quiet time, just get back on. Like, no one's perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You have to extend yourself some grace. Absolutely. You have to do that, because otherwise you're just going to go insane.
Yes.
I mean, and it's so funny. I mean, Bob is great because he could care less what the house looks like. And I'm like, I'm the one that's obsessing about it. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like you put so much pressure on yourself to succeed. Yeah. So it's kind of like you have to redefine what success is in your life, and that's a constant changing thing. Yeah. What's successful today is not going to be what's successful for you tomorrow, and I just feel like the expectations we have of ourselves that are placed upon us, and where do we get those?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
books,
right.
TV.
That's what I'm saying. It's like,
magazines.
Why do we have all these expectations? That, our focus should be just how do we love God fully with everything that we've got, and love our families and show love to other people. And, in the midst, I guess, I get filled up by serving other people. So I get filled up by that. So when I'm doing that for others, it's filling me up in the meantime. So I don't even see that as I'm putting myself, last or whatever, or not taking care of myself, because I feel like if you're filled up, with God, then He's going to sustain you and give you what you need to pour out.
So I reached out to probably 30-something women and asked them, like, in this phase of your parenting, what is the biggest struggle? And I reached out to moms that had kids that were my age and moms that had new babies. And I just wanted to fly through this list real quick. And my purpose in doing this is, if you're a mom out there and you're struggling with something, you might think you're the only one in the world that struggles with this. I guarantee it's on this list I'm about to read. Right. And I want you to know that you're normal. It's normal. You're going to get through this. And I just want to encourage you that it's not just you, and you can do this. So I'm going to read through these really quick. Okay. Comparison to other moms and women. Wanting your identity to be more than a mom. How to balance it all. Meal prep, organization, fostering friendships with other women. Keeping your relationship with your husband a priority. That's a big one. And some of these were multiple times, and I just combined them into one. Finding time for self-care and not feeling guilty. That was a huge one. Being pulled in all different directions for the kids' activities and not having quality time with them, just quantity time. That's a big thing I see. Learning to parent adult children, knowing that they are making mistakes, still supporting them, and letting them know that you'll always be there for them. That's what we're going through.
Yes.
Learning to keep my mouth shut and let them experience adulthood for themselves, even if I know it's going to be a poor experience. Being willing to let go of being the number one female in their life when they get married. Whew, that's the one I'm dealing with right now.
Right.
That's fine. Dealing with tantrums and 1,000 different ways that people tell you to deal with them and being judged. I know that's a big thing. Moms judging other moms. Time management for weekday evenings. I work, I get the kids in bed, and then I'm so exhausted there's no time for anything else. Knowing when to step in and help versus letting them make mistakes. That was a big one. When your child has made a choice in their life that you know is not good and you have to refuse to help them continue down that road. Whew, that's hard. Supporting my child who has a nervous disorder and knowing there's nothing I can do to change her and embracing the person she is. Knowing your adult kids have busy lives. You don't want to be a bother, but you wish you had more time together. And this particular mom said, I love one-on-one times like a breakfast or lunch with just my adult child. Raising teenage daughters with so many social media influences, low morals, and lack of faith. Trying to be a good mom while struggling with mental health myself. Guiding my adult child while still respecting that he or she is an adult and can and will make their own choices. Letting them make bad decisions and learn from them. Trying not to always give advice to my kids when they do not ask. Finding time with my adult kids when they are active, they have busy family schedules themselves. Being mindful of how to speak to my children, even when I'm feeling overwhelmed. Maintaining patience while I'm juggling schooling, a rambunctious 2-year-old, chores, kids' activities, and running a small business. Sometimes I lose it. Being one person when all three of my girls want all my attention, all to themselves. That's hard. Adult kids are hard. You have all the love and worry, but you have none of the control. Taking a step back and letting your child parent their child their way and not interfering because it may not be my way. Watching my adult child struggle with situations I cannot fix. Mom guilt, like when I do anything that's fun and doesn't involve them. Raising godly kids and still having time for self-care. Putting my kids' job, family, and everything else before myself and then constantly feeling drained. Navigating raising my kids in the chaos of all the worldly things and opinions. Finding focused time on each kid and their family and adapt as needed, all while working full-time myself and still having a teenager at home to raise. Being thoughtful before giving advice to adult children, like taking a minute, and that's hard. Being involved but not intrusive. Raising a teenager in a cell phone world and having him put it down sometimes. Trying to balance caution them and guide them to shine for Jesus and build relationships in such a different way than we ever had to do. And then social media was huge on a lot of people. Finding balance, there's just not a lot of hours in the day. Going back to work after having a baby and being a working mom, there's mom guilt there. Mm-hmm. Feeling the pressure of society to work full-time, cook dinner, have a clean house, and spend time with your family. Guilt for wanting to do something for myself. Sleep deprivation. That was a young mom. Helping them understand their faith path as an adult. My teen being overly sensitive to constructive criticism. They want to be treated and act like an adult, but they really don't have the knowledge or responsibility. Making sure my child with a disability will be taken care of after I pass. Encouraging my adult children to find and get involved in a church. Balancing all the opportunities my kids have. Not wanting them to miss out on something, yet wanting them to fit in. That's a huge one. Balance. I am always on the go with work or kids. I don't have time to get everything done around the house. And on the days I have extra time, I'm just too exhausted. Trying to instill confidence and maintain a sense of what we have taught our kids morally as they are bullied and suppressed by kids outside their circle. So as we wrap this up, if you can just...
That's a wow.
It was a lot. I think I felt all those things.
Man, yeah, that was a lot.
Being a mom can be so heavy. It's the greatest joy of our life, but it can be so heavy if just listening to all those things. So if we're going to wrap this up, but if you can just give me like 3 sentences that you would be a word of advice to you for someone who has kids or someone who doesn't have kids yet, but is going to, what would those 3 words be? Or 3 sentences?
The pressure.
No. Again, I knew it.
I know, right? Thanks, Kristi. 3 words of advice for parents or for moms. First of all, I think some good advice was given to me by a Christian lady, and she had 5 kids, and her youngest daughter played soccer with Riley, and she said to me, one prayer I always pray over my kids is they don't have to fall too far to figure out who God is to them, because as much as you want your kids to build a relationship and you bring them to church and you're doing all the right steps, it's still up to them. Yeah. To foster that relationship. And I think that's hard to let go of, you know, but the truth of the matter is they're not really our kids. Right. As much as you love them and you know, they came from you, and but they're God's kids, and it's His job. And I think that's part of what we do as moms is we try to take over God's job in the kids' lives. We try to do that, and we have to learn to let go a little bit, and that's so hard, because you want the best for your kids, but in the long run, they're going to become adults, and they're going to have their own choices to make. So I think, and just grace, offer yourself some grace, Don't feel guilty about spending some time on yourself. That's so important for you. Bob, I had a wonderful husband when the kids were little. I mean, this man would take my 3 little kids camping by himself with a buddy. So 2 guys and 3 kids on a camping trip overnight, even just one night. And I just remember laying in bed being like, oh, I don't have to get up. I don't have to listen for the kids. I don't have to cook dinner, So guys, do that for your wives, And I think just allowing yourself, not feeling guilty about that at all, because you want to be the best version of yourself, and you have to pour into yourself, whatever that is. Find whatever that is for you, even if it's once a month or whatever it works for you. It's different for every woman, to find that quality time, to spend a little bit of time on yourself. And then as a parent, I think, I don't know, I think giving your kids the freedom to be who they are, and just, I hate that saying, follow your heart, because your heart is so deceitful. I do not like that. So I'm like, teach your kid to follow God's heart.
Yes, right.
And
recognize it.
Yes, that's what I mean. Just keep everything that your kids are going through, just keep pointing them to Jesus every chance that you get. You cannot do that enough. Yep. Every single chance, whatever, good times, bad times, hard times, tough times, just keep pointing them in the right direction. And, it's a promise that your kids will not fall from the path, And even though they look like they're falling from the path,
right.
It's still in there, You've planted the seeds. It's going to work, and God's got to do it in His timing. Otherwise, they're not going to have that authentic relationship with God if you don't allow them to fall, even though we feel like they're going to fall. And they're going to fail, and that's okay.
Yeah. And that's very good off the cuff without knowing you're going to do that. I had a little time, so I just wrote a few out. I'll just go through them really quickly. 1, teach your kids about Jesus and His love early, and don't ever stop. 2, invest time in conversation more than anything, program, or event that money can buy. Don't compare yourself to other moms. Every kid, every family situation is different, and no one has it all together, no matter what they post, what you think you see, or what other people think. No one has it all together. Everyone has their behind the scenes crying time. There's going to be hard times for sure, but one of the truest statements I have ever heard is, the days are long, but the years fly by. The time goes so fast. Lastly, don't sweat the small stuff. Ask yourself this question: is this going to matter in a year? Learn to make the best in situations out of your control, because you will definitely have them. Life is short, and it can change in a minute. And as a very cute, wise boy once said, every day is a gift, so make the best of it. So, Amy, thanks for joining me. It was a lot of fun. You're an awesome mom. Happy Mother's Day. It's been fun watching you over the last 20 years be a mom. And for all you moms out there, happy Mother's Day. We hope that you've enjoyed this little snippet of our thoughts. And let us know what you thought. Let us know what you think and what you thought about this today. And if you have any ideas for a podcast that you would like to see, you can send it to podcast@sycamorecreek.org. Thank you, and we'll see you next week. Well, we won't see you next week, but Mitch and Steve will see you next week.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Yes.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the In All Things podcast. Our challenge for you today is to send this episode to one person. Seriously, think of somebody right now that could use this conversation and send it to them. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic ideas, please send them to podcast@sycamorecreek.org, and make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Sycamore Creek Church so that you can always see what's going on in our world. If this conversation helped you at all, make sure you share it, leave a review, and subscribe so that you don't miss out on a single episode. We love you, God loves you, and we'll see you next week on the In All Things podcast.